All right. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. We are back. Continuing on with our look at the triennial Torah portion. Today, we are going to be looking at Deuteronomy chapter 16. Deuteronomy chapter 16. We're going to be looking at that. We'll go ahead and read through that. And we will be discussing the observance of the month of Abib. So we got a lot of things to go over. So we're just going to jump right into it. We're going to go ahead and read through the chapter, and then we'll go ahead and look at some of the things that we want to see inside of it. There's a lot that we have to go over. So I'll go ahead and just pull that up for us. Deuteronomy chapter 16. Let me go ahead and put that up on the screen here. Read that. Starting with first verse. Nice and loud.
It says, "Guard the new moon of Abib and perform the Pesach to Yahweh your Elohim, for in the new moon of Abib Yahweh your Elohim brought you out of Mitzrayim by night, and you shall slaughter the Pesach to Yahweh your Elohim from the flock and from the herd in the place where Yahweh chooses to put his name. Eat no leavened bread with it. For 7 days you eat unleavened bread with it, bread of affliction, because you came out of the land of Mitzrayim in haste, so that you remember the day in which you came out of the land of Mitzrayim all the days of your life. And no leaven should be seen with you in all your border for 7 days. Neither should any of the meat which you slaughter in the evening on the first day stay all night until morning. You are not allowed to slaughter the Pesach within any of your gates, which Yahweh your Elohim gives you. But at the place where Yahweh your Elohim chooses to make his name dwell, there you slaughter the Pesach in the evening, at the going down of the sun, at the appointed time you came out of Mitzrayim. And you shall roast and eat it in the place which Yahweh your Elohim chooses. And in the morning you shall turn and go to your tents. 6 days you eat unleavened bread, and on the 7th day there is a closing festival to Yahweh your Elohim. You do no work. Count 7 weeks for yourself. Begin to count 7 weeks from the time you begin to put the sickle to the grain. And you shall perform the festival of Shavuot to Yahweh your Elohim according to the voluntary offering from your hand, which you give as Yahweh your Elohim blesses you. And you shall rejoice before Yahweh your Elohim, you and your son and your daughter and your male servant and your female servant and the Levite who is within your gates, and the stranger and the fatherless and the widow who are in your midst, at the place where Yahweh your Elohim chooses to make his name dwell. And you shall remember that you were a slave in Mitzrayim, and you shall guard and do these laws. Perform the festival of Sukkot for 7 days, after the ingathering from your threshing floor and from your winepress. And you shall rejoice in your festival, you and your son and your daughter, and your male servant and your female servant, and the Levite and the stranger, and the fatherless and the widow who are in your gates. For 7 days you shall celebrate to Yahweh your Elohim in the place which Yahweh chooses, because Yahweh your Elohim does bless you in all your increase, and in all the works of your hands. And you shall be only rejoicing. 3 times a year all your males appear before Yahweh your Elohim in the place which he chooses, at the festival of Matzot, and at the festival of Shavuot, and at the festival of Sukkot. And none should appear before Yahweh empty-handed, but each one with the gift of his hand, according to the blessing of Yahweh your Elohim, which he has given you. Appoint judges and officers within all of your gates, which Yahweh your Elohim is giving you, according to your tribes, and they shall judge the people with righteous right ruling. Do not distort right ruling. Do not show partiality, nor take a bribe, for a bribe blinds the eyes of the wise and twists the words of the righteous. Follow righteousness alone, so that you live and inherit the land which Yahweh your Elohim is giving you. Do not plant for yourself any tree as an Asherah near the slaughter place of Yahweh your Elohim that you make for yourself. And do not set up a pillar which Yahweh your Elohim hates.
Okay, very good. All right, so there is a lot in this chapter. We kind of today are going to focus in on one specific thing dealing with what it talks about over there up in the beginning. So let's go back up to verse 1, where it says to the scriptures version says to guard the new moon of Abib. To guard the new moon of Abib. So we want to go ahead and look at that. Actually got some slides here I want to go ahead and pull up here. Let me go ahead and get these together here. Actually should have pre got these together. Hold on one second here.
No.
Put this up on the screen over here. Okay, so again, we want to look at this first verse here as it talks about where it says over here to guard or to observe the month of Abib. And so if we notice, if we look over here, the word that's translated as observe is shamar. And so we talked about shamar a lot in regards to the idea of keeping the commandments, right? Or guarding the commandments, or putting a hedge about the commandments. And so we also talked about the fact that when we think about the idea of putting a hedge around or shamaring the commands, we talked about the fact that this word shamar, within it you have the idea of doing that which is necessary to keep the commandments, right? So if I know that, for instance, if we think about the Shabbat, I know that I need to make provisions because I can't, go shop or do my commerce and things on the Shabbat. So I have to prepare ahead of time. And so when I think about this idea of shamar, all of these things are incorporated in it. We think about how it's translated in the English, where it might say to keep the commands, and you have the idea of doing the commands. But when we think about guarding the commands or protecting the commands or preserving the commands, the idea is about doing those things which are necessary to allow you to be able to do it. And so when we think about this idea of observing the month of Abib, so now we're talking about the idea of observing or guarding the month, right? Or preserving it. Putting a hedge around it. We bought property. We talked about the putting a fence around it. But before you can go and do the act of putting a fence around it, there has to be like a survey done. Right? And so you have to know the exact parameters of it. And so again, we think about the idea of observing the month of Abib. We can say that we want to observe it or protect it or put a hedge about it, but we have to actually know what it is in order to do that.
Yeah.
Okay, so again, we look at this word here, shamar. It has the idea of to watch, right? The word naturally means to watch over some physical object, to keep an eye on it. In its participle form, the word means human guards, those who watch for people or over designated objects, right? When somebody, when you're in, you're on security watch, right? You're watching over a particular thing, right? You have to look for and view and see something, right? And so all of these things are things that we have to think about when we think about the idea of guarding or observing the month, right? And so as we look at this over here, to observe the month. So let's talk about this word that is translated as month, right? Which is Kodesh. Kodesh. Right? This word here, Kodesh, is translated as the new moon. There's a word for moon, right? There's a word for moon. There's a word for new. But this word here, Kodesh is the new moon, right? It's translated in many translations as the new month. If we look, the root word of Kodesh is Kadash. Kadash, which is to be new, to rebuild, to renew, or to repair. Okay? And so when we think about this word over here, this word Kodesh, the form of the word that we see over here in terms of this new moon, again, this word is to renew, to restore. It refers to the renovating or the reconstructing of various items, right? It could be an altar, the altar of Yahweh, rebuilding it, the temple, the surface of the ground. It's used figuratively in an intensive stem to indicate the restoring or revitalizing of one's spirit. That's over in Psalms 51 and 10. In a time of restoration, ruined cities will be rebuilt. Is used for the Almighty's restoring the past blessed days of Jerusalem. Also, when we think about this word Kodesh, again, we have the new moon, and we look in this. This is the word study definition, where it says that it's used, and it can be put in two categories. One, the new moon, the day when the crescent moon is once again visible, and two, as in regards to the actual month, a time marked by 30 days normally. And so even when we look at this this particular definition, it here defines the moon as the day, the new moon, when the crescent moon is once again visible. So if we look at this in the ancient Hebrew, again, we have the chet, we have the dalet, and the sheen, right? And so if we look at the ancient, we have this fence, right? It's kind of like a wall. It's a barrier, right? It's something that shows the distinction. It's how things are differentiated, right? We talked about the actual idea of a fence, right? That's what the chet represents. The dalet is the tent door flap, right? It's the tent door flap, which it deals with movement. It deals with the in and the outs of something. And then also we have the sheen, which is the two front teeth, which has the idea of sharpness. And also, because of the fact that the two front teeth is where you bite, you also have the idea of tightness, right? So restriction, right? And so when we look at all of this together, we see with this word Kodesh or Kadash, the distinction or the differentiation is a door that is tight. Okay, the distinction or the differentiation is a door that is tight. And so when we think about a door that is tight, right? We think about a door, right, that's barely open, right? This door that's barely open, that's kind of allowing this light kind of just to peek through, right? And this is the thing that we see when we think about the actual new moon, right? When we look at the moon at this time that is new, right? You just have this little tiny bit of light here shining on it, right? This is more of what a new moon looks like, right? And so we look over here at this picture here. We see all of these things, this new moon. And again, this is just a picture, kind of a lesson, when you think about the idea of this door, this distinction that is the door that is tight, that's just barely letting through the light. Okay, all right, so let's go on to the next thing over here. And so how is one able to guard the month?
So the door isn't all the way open.
It's not all the way open.
It's not like the
And
floor.
even if it was closed, right? There's still some light kind of coming through the cracks.
Right.
Right? Because that's how you know that this thing is new, right? So, how is one able to guard the month? Right? What would you be guarding it from? How would you be preserving it or protecting it? Right? This is what we want to kind of think about, because Deuteronomy chapter 16 is saying that this is what we must do: observe the month of Abib, right? Observe it, guard it, shamar it, right? So we spoke briefly about the new moon, but before we go more into the moon, we also will have to think about this other part, right? Observe the month of Abib, right? So it's not only observing a month, but a particular month. Right? And so if we go back over to, if we look at Exodus 12, read that 12 and 2 right there.
It says, "This month shall be unto you the beginning of months. It shall be the first month of the year to you."
Okay, so Exodus 12, chapter 12, verse 2, where it says this month, it's talking about the month of Abib. Right? So it's the beginning of months. It's the first month of the year to you. Right? It's the new year. Okay? And so what we have to do here is to deal with the fact that if we're talking about the beginning of months, the month of Aviv, we also must establish how a year is reckoned as well, right? Because we can know how to say when a month is. But how do we know when the restart is? How do we know we get back to the time when it's time to do a new year? Do we just count 12 months and then every 12th month, after that we just start over again? We have to see what it is that the scripture, tells us, if anything, to do.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so again, from this Exodus 12:2, we see over here this word year. Hold on 1 second here. Okay, it's guarded by understanding and knowing when it is new, right? By watching, by protecting the witness that it offers. Okay, so this word over here for year is Shanan. Shanan, that's the word that we see that's translated as year. And so it's a year as a revolution of time, right? So whenever we see the word year, it's probably this word over here. And so if we look back over at Genesis, read Genesis 1:14 right there.
It says, "And Elohim said, Let there be light in the firmament of the heaven to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and for years."
Okay, very good. So when we look over at Genesis, it helps us to understand that the lights in the sky are to be used for the signs and for the seasons and for the days and for the Shananim, for the years, right? So let's go into a little bit of ancient astronomy. Okay, because this is necessary when we think about the idea of the lights in the sky. Not astrology, right? We're not talking about you know, talking about people's characteristics that go along with their star chart and what have you. But astronomy is simply the science of the luminaries in the sky. And so we want to go ahead and look at a few things dealing with ancient astronomy, because when we look in the scriptures, we find some interesting things. Go ahead and read right there, Job 9:9. Read both of those verses there.
It says, first one is, which maketh Arcturus, Orion, and Pleiades, and the chambers of the south.
Okay, so what I was saying, the context over here is dealing with mostly the Most High, which, the pretext, the Most High, which maketh Arcturus, Orion, and Pleiades, and the chambers of the south. When it says which, it's talking about, the Most High is the one which does all of these things, right? And the other verse is?
It says, canst thou bind the sweet influences of Pleiades, or loose the bands of Orion? Canst thou bring forth Mazzaroth in his season? Or canst thou guide Arcturus with his sons?
Okay, so in the book of Job, we see reference all of these interesting things that help us to understand that these ancients had some type of idea. There was some ancient astrology that these people was getting into. They had to know about it. And it wasn't rare to think about people, especially these people who were in tune with nature, because they were herders. They lived out in the fields, and they had to know what things were going on in nature, right? And the things in the sky, those things go along with nature, right? It's just another aspect, right? Mm-hmm. And so Arcturus, we are told, is the name that is still connected with the Great Bear, a constellation in the northern hemisphere. When we think about the Great Bear, probably we call it it may be Ursa Major, is what we might think about it as. I'll have to look that up. But I think that's what that is, right? But Orion, right? Orion, we know about Orion and Orion's belt, right? The constellation commonly known as the Giant. The space in the sword of the Giant alone is estimated to be 2.2 quadrillion. I said quadrillion. Quintillion times larger than the sun. Okay? And so, again, this is things that are mentioned over here in Job. Orion. Pleiades. The name given to 7 stars in the neck of the constellation of Taurus. Right? Again, these are the things that are named over here in this verse, right? And then it also talks about the chambers of the south. Just what this refers to is not known, but the word for chambers means a private apartment of a dwelling. Here it may mean the abode of the stars of the south, or that division of stars in the southern parts of the heavens. Okay? And so when we think about these people back in the day, they had an understanding of the stars in the skies. And so when we think about the movement of the stars, It's not something that's outside of the realm of possibility for these people to know and understand what's going on in the heavenlies in terms of the lights and the stars in the sky. Okay? All right, so let's look over in the book of Judges. Over here, read that right there, Judges 5 and 20.
Says they fought from heaven, the stars in their courses fought against Sisera.
Okay, so over here we see this song of Deborah. In it, we see that it talks about the stars in their courses. The stars in their courses. This word is thoroughfare, viaduct, staircase, causeway, highway, path. And so when we think about this, is most likely within the song hyperbole, because the stars I don't think came down and helped in the attack against the people, but just talking about the fact that these things are mentioned, the fact that there is a pathway of the stars, and just that these different ones are acknowledging these things. Okay, so we've got these verses that are showing us that the people of old knew about the stars and the luminaries in the sky, but the scripture doesn't give us clear instructions. Again, we're thinking about now how to know when the year is new, right? The scripture don't say this is how you determine the new year, right? We know that we're supposed to look at the lights in the sky to determine the years, and we know that the people knew about the lights in the sky, but there's still not explicit instructions as to how to go about doing it. Okay, so does the scripture help us in regards to how to determine the new year? Right? We have to ask this question. First of all, Deuteronomy 16:1 is telling us to observe the month of Abib, which is the first month, which again tells you that you have to keep watch, guard that first month of the year or the new year. Right? And so if it's telling us to do it, how then are we supposed to get to the place where we're able to do it? How are we supposed to know? Okay, there's more clues given to us in the scriptures. Read this verse over here, Exodus 34 and 22.
Thou shalt observe the feast of weeks, of the first fruit of fruits of wheat harvest, and the feast of ingathering at the year's end.
Okay, very good. So we see over here in Exodus 34 and 22, it's referring to the year's end, right? We want to figure out when it begins, but this verse over here says where the year's end is. So let's look at this and see what we can see from this over here. All right, the Feast of Ingathering is the Feast of Tabernacles or Sukkot. So now we see that Passover, unleavened bread, is at the beginning of the year, right? With the month of Abib, the beginning of months, and Tabernacles, as it says over here, is at the end. Interesting. So this word that's translated as end is Tekufa. Tekufa, which is a revolution that is of the sun, or a course, right, of time, a lapse, circuit, for something to come about, or its end. Okay, so we continue over here, we see that there are 4 places in the scripture where this word tekufa is used. And go ahead and read. We've read Exodus 34:22. Read those other 3 verses there.
It says, and it came to pass at the end of the year that the host of Syria came up against him, and they came to Judah and Jerusalem and destroyed all the princes of the people from among the people, and sent all the spoil of them unto the king of Damascus. And it came to be at the turn of days that Hannah conceived and bore a son, and called his name Shemuel, because I have asked Yahweh for him. Its rising is from one end of the heavens, and its circuit to the other end, and naught is hidden from its heat.
Okay, very good. So we see again, these are the 4 places, right? And it's used, differently, it seems. And some of these here, this is again Exodus 34:22, where it says a year's end. Similarly, over in 2 Chronicles, where it's talking about the end of the year, the turn of days, and the circuit over here in Psalms. And so if we look over here at the Chronicles verse, in the Chronicles verse, the word tekufa is used in a similar way that is used in our main verse that we're thinking about over Exodus 34. This is the end of a cycle. A particular revolution has not only taken place, but has been brought back to the place at which it began. Okay? So when we see over here with 2 Chronicles, right, again, it's kind of used in a similar manner as what we see over in Exodus. If we go over to looking at 1 Samuel, where it's talking about Hannah, where it says that when we look over here, the word tekufa is giving us the idea that the accumulation of days has went through its process, right? It came to be at the turn of days that Hannah conceived and bore a son. Like she was at the end of the cycle of her pregnancy, right? She had got to the tekufa of days, the accumulation of the cycle of her pregnancy, and then she bore a son, right? And so she went from start to finish. The days / time has lapsed. And so the context tries to help us to understand the process went from conception to birth, and now it's over. Okay, and so when we think about, again, this word tekufa, all of these things are these verses are helping us to understand what this word means, right? Okay, so let's look at the next one over here, which is how it's used over in the book of Psalms, where it says, and its circuit, talking about the sun, its circuit to the other end. Okay, so this word tekufa is dealing with the cycle of the sun. The path that the sun has went on has ran its course, right? It's rising from one end of the heavens to the other, and it circuit the path that it took to the other end, right? And so when we think about this word tekufa, it's giving you this picture of a cycle, the end of a cycle, the completion of a cycle, all the things that are incorporated in the path or the course of a thing, kind of a point, right? So, understanding that, looking back at Exodus, we see that it is dealing with the year making a revolution. Knowing that I got too many that's in here. It's actually the 7th month is not the literal end of the year. However, there is a particular marker that can be thought of when we think of an end of a cycle, and that is the equinox, right? The equinox, the place in, when we think about the movement of the skies, of how the sun moves in the skies, the equinox is one of those markers. When it gets to the place, when we think about the springtime, when we have an equal amount of daylight and an equal amount of sunlight, right? Where it meets at a particular place. When the sun actually goes from the from the easternmost point to the westernmost point, when it goes from 90 degrees to 270 degrees, when it goes straight across the sky. And so there's 2 points in the year when that happens, at the springtime and at the fall time, right? You have the spring equinox and you have the fall equinox. And so when we think about this word equinox, this marker that we see in the sky, it gives us a point of reference to look towards. All right, so the harvest, the ingathering, the time after summer when things begin to get cooler and the weather changes, the fall equinox is that marker that corresponds with all of these things. And so when we think about Exodus, the verse in Exodus where it talks about the Feast of Ingathering happening at the end of the year, because again, we know it's the 7th month. There's 12 months. It's not the end of the year, but it's the end of a particular cycle. And again, the lights in the sky are for the seasons. The sun is the biggest light in the sky that we see over here. And so the scripture is specifically helping us to understand that the cycle of the sun helps us to be able to pinpoint when the Feast of Tabernacles should be. All right. Okay, so equinox. We talked about equinox. Let's say what it is according to 1828 Webster's Dictionary. The precise time when the sun enters one of the equinoctial points, or the first point of Aries. Remember Aries, we'll talk about this later. Aries is a constellation, about the 21st of March. And the first point of Libra, another star constellation, about the 23rd of September, making the day and the night of equal lengths. These are called the vernal and autumnal equinoxes. These points are found to be moving backward and or westward at the rate of 50 degrees of a degree in a year. And so again, the equinox is this precise time when we're able to physically view the sun. And again, we don't need any kind of high-powered technology to be able to follow the path of the sun through the sky. People had sundials and things, going all the way back. Okay, they knew the shapes and the science of the stars, right? And they knew the path of the sun. So much so that the scripture mentions it in Exodus, right? What we just looked at. All right, so let's keep on going over here. Okay, so let us look at the historical record. Okay, because the scriptures, again, is giving us clues. The scripture's giving us clues, but it's not directly, explicitly saying this is what it is. Right? But if we look to the historical record, we could see how the people of old actually did it. And that's what we'll do right now. Okay? Again, the scripture hints at things and points us in a particular direction, but we have the historical record to see what the ancients, have some spelling issues, actually did. All right, so let's talk about most importantly what Yeshua did. What did Yeshua do? Good question. Read that right there.
Yeshua gives us a very important premise.
A premise, right? This is he tells us how we're supposed to think about things. He tells us what presupposition we're supposed to have in regards to how we're supposed to move forward in things, right? Read that verse right there.
Then spake Yeshua to the multitude and to his disciples, saying, the scribe and the Pharisees sit in Moses' seat. All therefore whatsoever they bid you observe, that observe and do, but do not ye after their works, for they say and do not.
Okay, very good. So Yeshua says over here to the multitude, the scribes and the Pharisees, they sit in Moses' seat. They are the teachers and the interpreters of Scripture. The things that they come up with, that's what you do. He said, all therefore whatsoever they bid you to observe, you observe that. Not what they do, because he goes on to talk about the fact that they're a bunch of hypocrites. But it don't take away from the fact that he said don't do what they do what they say. Okay? And so when we think about that, understanding that the scribes and the Pharisees, they were the ones that had things set in order. They said what the Bible was saying to the people. And so the ways and customs that they brought forth is what the people did and what Yeshua did. And so when we follow the Pharisees throughout history, they turn into the thoughts of the rabbinic thought processes come from those Pharisees, right? And so again, whatever it is that the Jews at that time, at the time of Yeshua, were doing, and we're able to see, we'll look and see what they did. That's what he said that we should be doing. Okay? All right, so let's keep on going over here. Yeshua instructed the people of his time to follow the teachings of the Pharisees. Therefore, to nail down the practices of the time of Yeshua, we can look to his contemporaries to understand how they did things at that time. Okay, so notable first century historians, people that were actually the contemporaries of Yeshua, Flavius Josephus. I put an extra E in Josephus' name. It's not Josephus. It's Josephus and Philo. These are both people who were alive at the time of Yeshua. Josephus, who really was a historian. Philo, who was a philosopher, actually. He was a Jewish, Hellenistic, Jew-ish philosopher. However, the things that he speaks about in regards to the calendar, he does kind of wax poetic at times about things, but we're also actually able to see where he simply gives you facts, where he's saying that this is what was done, and then how he goes into describing the meaning of what was done. That's it gets kind of philosophical, but we can't take away from the fact that he's giving you a picture of what the people at the time of Yeshua were doing. Okay, so Josephus, we see that he was born in 37 through born in 37, died in 101. Okay, so he was a first century person. He was alive at the same time as the apostles and things, and did, his form of religion was the same as the apostles, right? He was from a distinguished family, acquainted with the Essenes and Sadducees, and he actually became a Pharisee, right? So he obviously was familiar with the sect of Judaism that Yeshua said, do what these people say, right? Philo was from Alexandria, over there in a city in North Africa, Egypt. Jewish-born exegete who greatly influenced Christian patristic interpretation of the Old Testament, talking about the ancient so-called Christian fathers, the people who were the disciples of the disciples, who had so much things to say about doctrines and the scriptures and things of the time. Oftentimes you see them quoting Philo. Okay, he was born to a rich family in Alexandria. Philo was a contemporary of Yeshua and lived an ascetic and contemplative life that makes some believe that he was a rabbi. His interpretation of scripture based the spiritual sense on the literal, although influenced by Hellenism. Philo's theology remains thoroughly Jewish. Okay, so let us look at Philo first. Okay, so from his writings, Special Laws number 1, at the first season, which name he gives to the springtime and its equinox, he ordained that what is called the Feast of Unleavened Bread should be kept for 7 days, all of which he declared should be honored equally in the ritual assigned to them. For he ordered 10 sacrifices to be offered each day, as at the new moons, whole burnt offerings, amounting to 70 in all, apart from the sin offerings. He considered that the 7 days of the feast bore the same relation to the equinox, which falls in the 7th month, as the new moon does to the month. And so over here we see where there is a connection that's given between the equinox and the 7th month, and also in the 1st month, right? Talks about the first season in the springtime and its equinox, and also the 7th month and its equinox. And so again, we see that, the way in which they were observing these days were in connection with the path the path of the sun, the equinox. Okay, next we have from the Decalogue, where he talks about the 10 Commandments. To 7, he gives the chief feasts prolonged for many days. 2 feasts, that is for the 2 equinoxes, each lasting 7 days. Talking about Feast of Unleavened Bread, which lasts for 7 days, and talking about the Feast of Tabernacles, which lasts for 7 days. The first in the spring to celebrate the ripeness of the sown crops. The second in the autumn for the ingathering of all the tree fruits. And so again, it's interesting that we see Philo again talking about these 2 feasts and connecting them to these 2 equinoxes, right? And again, we already see how the Bible itself talks about the tabernacle, Feast of Tabernacles, being at the end of the year, at the end of the cycle of the year. And that cycle being that Tekufa, being that equinox. And so when we look at the people who were doing it, the people that were doing it in the way in which Yeshua was doing it, they too bear witness to the fact that these feast times correspond with the 2 equinoxes. What's Cam have to say over here? Ironically, Yehoshua was crucified during the month of Abib on Passover. Could this mean more of a prophetic reason to guard the month? Yes, absolutely. When we think about the significance of, what we find in Yeshua, again, when we look from a spiritual standpoint, the Torah is about Yeshua, right? It's his story about him to us. But we first have to understand what it meant, primarily, literally meant, in order to bring him back to see Yeshua in all of this, right? And so, at the end of the day, it's all about, bringing us back to the Father, and the way that we do that is through Yeshua. And so when we think about this idea of observing the month of Abib and trying to do it in a way that's in line with what the people did, especially at the time of Yeshua, we have to look back at all of these things and see how it is that these things were done. What do we have? Okay, so let's look at one more of these from Philo. It says, "For it was the general festival of the Jews at the time of the autumnal equinox, during which is the custom of the Jews to live in tents." Okay, so obviously that's speaking about the Feast of Tabernacles, right? That's the time when we dwelled in tents. But it's interesting that, again, he says over here that it is the time of the autumnal equinox. So it's putting Sukkot roundabouts the autumnal equinox. All right, so let's keep on going over here. And so next we have something from Josephus, which says, "In the month of Xanthicus, which is by us called Nisan," which I could add by us is called Abib, and is the beginning of our year, on the 14th day of the lunar month, when the sun is in Aries. Okay, Aries, again, remember we talked about Aries before, the constellation that the sun is in at the time of the equinox. "For in this month it was that we were delivered from bondage under the Egyptians. the law ordained that we should every year slay the sacrifice, which I before told you we killed when we came out of Egypt, and which was called the Passover. And so over here, again, we see this connection made by Josephus with the Passover being at a specific time and it being aligned with this whole idea of the equinox being this marker. But also it adds this other thing with the stars in terms of the sun being in a particular place, which is in the constellation of Aries, which again is where it's at the time that it completes its cycle. So all of these things bear witness with the fact that we're able to see how we're able to determine when the beginning of the year is, based on the lights in the sky, based on the historical record, right, that's given to us from the people that were actually doing it. Okay, so historically, the contemporaries of Yeshua understood the equinox, the pattern of the sun and its marker, to be the determining factor in reckoning the new year. Passover had to be in the spring after the equinox, and tabernacles had to be in the fall after the fall equinox. Okay, and so we see this final part over here, over in the book of Exodus, and then when we look at the historical record, we see that that's how they understood it. And that's how they practiced it back in the time of Yeshua. All right, so let's go back now to the months. Let's go back to the months. So, how is one able to guard the month then? What would you be guarding it from? How would you be preserving it and protecting it? Again, we ask the question. Okay? How does a month begin? When is it new? Well, we said earlier that it was the first crescent, but we want to talk about that a little more. Oh, we have questions, comments over here. Let's see here. I'm wondering if the rabbinical priesthood of that day was using the book of Enoch and Jubilees to count the days, months, times, and seasons. Actually, when we think about book of Enoch, book of Jubilees, we know that these books were around, right? These are things that were kind of intertestamental area books, the book of Enoch, the book of Jubilees. But when you do the historical research and look at the Pharisees, which were the proto-rabbinic people, the people who turned into the rabbinic teachings, they had a canon of scripture, and it was basically the Old Testament that we know of. It didn't include the book of Enoch. It didn't include Jubilees. We find those over with another sect of people over there with the Essenes, right? Who was a different group of people. You know, they had other thoughts. The way that they calculated the calendar was basically a solar calendar, and we're able to know that from the Dead Sea Scrolls. And so, when we think about the rabbinic thought process in terms of how they, brought their calendar into reality, the way that they practiced it, it didn't include those books, even though those books were in fact in existence. Okay. But you know, there's there's a lot of you know, history that backs this up that I can actually show you at some point. Okay, so let's talk about some things over here. All right, so our thoughts on the matter are quite simple. When you begin to see the moon again, that's when it's new. The light is what we're looking for, according to the scripture, so we can analyze the phases and movements of the moon. Okay? All right, so the moon actually does not create its own light. Rather, it reflects the sun's light. However, it is the light that we are looking for. It's the light that we're looking for, not necessarily the absence of light, right? We're not dealing with the conjunction of the moon, the dark moon. We're looking for the light of the moon. Read again. I don't know if you read this already. Read Genesis 1 and 14.
And Elohim said, "Let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and for years."
Okay, he made the lights in the sky for the seasons. We look for them. We watch them. We observe them. If we want to know how we are to observe, protect, protect the month, the first month of the year, we have to look for the light. Look to the light. This is the opposite of the poltergeist, right? They said don't look to the light. We say look to the light,
That
right?
cracked door. Look to the cracked door.
When you see that cracked door in the sky, that's when the month has reset itself. Okay? Okay, so the absence of light is not our signifier, right? It said the lights in the sky. The lights in the sky. That's what we're looking for. So, I mean, I guess somebody could say when it's talking about the lights in the sky, it's really just talking about the moon and not necessarily the work that it does. Somebody could say that. I guess they could say that. I don't think that would be right if they said it, but I think the argument can be made. So let's look at some of these verses over here. Read for us these verses over here. Nice and loud.
It says, "But in those days after that tribulation, the sun shall be darkened, and the moon shall not give her light."
Okay, so these are verses that people use to talk about the moon having its own light. But it's interesting that when we look at these things, when we're talking about these times, these days and times when judgment is coming, and part of the judgment is the moon not being able to show its light, whether it's its own light or not. I'm saying that it's not its own light; it's a reflection of the sun. But a thing to look at over here is that these verses are talking about judgment coming, and a darkened moon is part of the thing that's part of the judgment. Okay, read Ezekiel 32:7.
It says, "And when I shall put thee out, I will cover the heaven and make the stars thereof dark. I will cover the sun with a cloud, and the moon shall not give her light."
Okay, very good. Another same thing. Isaiah 13:10. Read that too.
It says, "For the stars of heaven and the constellations thereof shall not give their light. The sun shall be darkened in his going forth, and the moon shall not cause her light to shine."
Okay, very good. Again, so these verses, again, like I said, are verses that people use to say that the moon has its own light. Which, that's interesting. That's interesting that it says that, but when you think about when you think about, even when you think about what's going on, the sun is the thing that's being darkened, the thing that lights up the moon. So the sun gets darkened, and of course, there won't be no light from it because it reflects the sun. But the thing that I'm wanting to point out here is that it's the light that we're looking for. And so when the Most High comes and he's judging, he's taking away those lights out of the sky. And so I'm saying we're supposed to be looking for the light, not looking for the absence of light. All right, so let's keep on going. Let's keep on looking over here. Another verse. Psalms 104 and 19. What's that say right there?
It says, he appointed the moon for seasons. The sun knows his going down.
Okay, he appointed the moon for seasons, right? Okay, so again, when we talk about this idea of observing the month, watching the month, understanding it, we're looking towards it to see it, to view it. We're looking for a signifier. We're looking for a light. What's Teresa saying? How about the fullness of light? You talking about the full moon? You mean? When we talk about the new moon, I just want to say, let me just put my picture up here. I just want to say, when we talk about the full moon, we don't have any, I can't find any records of people observing the full moon as the new moon. And if we say that we are observing the full moon as a new moon because Israel perhaps did this in their pre-exilic customs, I'm saying that pre-exilic Israel was wicked. That's why they became exilic in the first place. The customs that they were doing were customs that they got from the surrounding nations, was the reason why the Most High came and put us in exile in the first place. We wasn't acting right, so he came and had the people come and take us out of there. And so when we look to the pre-exilic customs and say these are the ways that we should be doing, I have issues with that. First of all, because those are the ones, that's the picture of Israel that we see. That's not a good picture. Mm-hmm. Right? He wasn't happy with that version of us. Mm-hmm. And so therefore he came and destroyed the people and scattered us all over the place. Right. Because of that. So we can't use that as an example of why we would do it, first of all. Second of all, we don't have any example in the scripture to help us to think that a full moon is a new moon. And thirdly, we don't have any known, that I know of, examples in the historical record of not just Israel, but whoever using the full moon as a new moon. I mean, when you even think about it, it looks like the cycle begins as a light begins. It grows, it gets full, and then it decreases. Like it's a complete cycle. It seems like the full's in the middle, just when you just think about it. It doesn't fit the definition of Chodesh. It doesn't, because it's already been fully repaired. It's been fully made new. But it's not the beginning of the making new process. It's already at its fullness. It's just too many issues.
It's as new as a man in the prime of his life, and comparing him as an infant.
I mean, come on. We don't even got to think about it that hard. Like, is a grown man a new man? He's fully grown.
Right.
A full moon is fully grown moon. That's the new moon? It's just, I have a hard time even thinking about it from that perspective. But there's two other reasons that I've given that, that go along with that. So it's just, it's a hard thing. But let's keep on going. All right. So let's look at some more of these verses over here. Oh, this is a good one over here. It's full moon people. Dark moon people, I think, use this verse as well. But I use it too.
This one here?
No. This one here. Read this one here. Sirach.
He made the moon also to serve in her season for a declaration of times and a sign of the world. From the moon is the sign of feast, a light that decreases in her perfection. The moon, or the month, is called after her name, increasing wonderfully in her changing, being an instrument of the armies above, shining in the firmament of heaven, the beauty of heaven, the glory of the stars, an ornament giving light in the highest places of the Almighty.
I mean, to me, the important part that we're looking at over here is the idea of the light and the beauty of the light. And so when we think about the moon, we think about its beauty and its light. And so when we think about a moon becoming new, we're talking about light being restored to it. Okay, this is what we think about when we think about this. The moon in general, we think about light. But when we think about its newness, its kodeshness, we're thinking about its light, the light that it gives. All right, let's keep on going over here. Okay, so does the Bible teach us how to reckon months, or do we use the Bible to teach our thoughts? I think at times people do indeed use the Bible to teach our thoughts instead of letting the Bible teach us what it says. When we think about the idea of determining or reckoning a month, the Bible does not. The Bible does not explicitly say this is how you determine a month. It don't do it. That's why we got these people that why we have so many different ways that people go about reckoning a month, because of that fact. Because of the fact that the Bible does not, in fact, say this is how you do it. We have verses that we look at and we see what they say, and we take our thoughts and we create these doctrines based on our thoughts instead of the Bible telling us what to do. Case in point, when we look at these two verses, read those two verses for us.
Blow up the trumpet in the new moon and the time appointed on our solemn feast day. He hath taken a bag of money with him and will come home at the day appointed.
Okay, so when we think about the conjunction or the dark moon, people who say that the new moon is the conjuncted moon, the moon in its conjunction phase when it's dark, they use these two verses here because these underlying words here, this appointed word here, in the Hebrew, they say means full moon. I don't believe that it says full moon, but I'm saying this is what is said about it. So let's look at that word here. which is kase. Kese. Fullness, properly, or the full moon, that is festival. Okay, so this word that is translated as appointed actually is translated as full moon, not new moon or dark moon. If you was to pull up as many translations as you could find, literal translations, that is, translations that are taking the literal, not like the NIV is not a literal translation, but if you was to take a literal translation like the KJV, the ESV, or the NASB, these are all literal translations. None of them translate this word here as new moon. They all translate it as full moon. But this word here, kase, its root word here is to plump, that is to fill up, to cover. Here's this catchy part here, to cover, right? To clad self, clothes, conceal, cover self. And so if I was a dark moon person, I would say, aha, this word here that means, that's actually, first of all, we have to notice the vowel points, because they have the same letters with different vowel points. So the vowel points are giving us a different, this is the root. And then when we look back at the different vowel points of pronunciation, we're given that to have a different understanding of what the root actually is. And so that's for one thing. But many people who talk about this word here, they don't acknowledge the vowel point. So it's not a thing for them, right? It's all of this, everything is the same. But if we look over here at Jusinius over here takes this root word, and he says, he gives you the word in these verses here, Proverbs 7:20 and Psalms 81:4, which we read, to mean full moon. And then he gives you these different languages, these sister languages that also kind of use it in the same manner. But here, the part that people go to is this bottom part over here, where it says that etymology is not clear to me, Jusinius, for it is not satisfactory to say that it is so called from the whole moon being then covered with light. Verbs of covering are often applied in the sense of hiding and covering over, but never, as far as I know, to that of giving light. And so Jusinius questions the idea of this word actually even meaning full moon, because it comes from the root that means to cover, and we wouldn't talk about something, well, he's saying that we wouldn't talk about something to be covered with light. That being said, the word is always translated as full moon. It's never translated as new moon. And when the way that we think about things is sometimes different than the way that Western thought is. And so when we think about the idea, I'm saying, at least me, when I think about the idea of something being covered with light, like this is the way in which if we look throughout the language, the way that these things are described are using pictures and things for their descriptions. And so it's not beyond the realm of possibility, even though he's saying from a linguistic standpoint, he doesn't understand why it's being used in this way. But it doesn't take away from the fact that it is, in fact, being used in this way. And so when we look at these words, we could potentially kind of get tripped up over here because we have this writer of this lexicon, Jacinius, probably one of the oldest lexicographers that there is, that we know of, casting this doubt as to why this word is being translated in this way. But at the end of the day now, when we get to the place where we have this thing, what do we do? How do we understand this? Well, we have to look to what the people actually did. Okay? So again, we have to go to our historians to help us. Okay? So what did Philo have to say on the new moon? Again, we're not dealing with Philo's philosophies on the new moon. We're dealing with his description of what the people of his time were actually doing. Okay? All right, so special laws 2.
Now, there are 10 festivals in number as the law sets them down. The first is that which anyone will perhaps be astonished to hear called a festival. This festival is every day. The second festival is the seventh day, which the Hebrews in their native language call the Sabbath. The third is that which comes after the conjunction, which happens on the day of the new moon in each month.
Okay, very good. So this is very important because it's talking about something that happens not at the conjunction, which would be the dark moon, but the thing that comes after the conjunction, which is in fact the new moon. Okay, and so he has more to say about this. Is just kind of a beginning. He's going down, as you notice. He says first, second, third. He's going down the different festivals that there are. I have a comment over here. Let's see. The feasts are all at the full moons. Well, you're right. The feasts are at the full moons, not necessarily at the new moons, unless you think about the feast of trumpets, right? But the other feasts you think about, unleavened bread, well, at least the feast that we're dealing with, unleavened bread, tabernacles, you're dealing with the full moons, right? And so dealing back with the verse over there, when you're blowing the trumpet at your full moons or your appointed times, it makes sense when you're dealing with the actual feast days over here. But again, we look over here at Philo's observation, right? He's about to get real philosophical about each one of these things. But what we want to notice is is this over here, this third thing that he's talking about, the new moon, which happens after the conjunction, which happens on the day of the new moon of each month, right? So when he gets into it, this is what he says over here.
Following the order which we have adopted, we proceed to speak of the third festival, that of the new moon, first of all, because it is the beginning of the month, and the beginning, whether of number or of time, is honorable. Secondly, because at this time there is nothing in the whole of the heaven destitute of light.
Okay, so when he's talking about the new moon, he's saying that there's nothing in the heavens, in the sky, that is without light. if they were thinking about the conjunction obviously there isn't any light. When we think about the new moon is the first visible light, the moon, right? And so he is bearing witness to the fact that they're actually looking for lights. And at that new moon time, there's nothing that's destitute of light.
Thirdly, we good?
Yes.
Thirdly, because at the period, the more powerful and important body gives a portion of necessary assistance to the less important and weaker body. For at the time of the new moon, the sun begins to illuminate the moon with a light which is visible to the outward senses, and then she displays her own beauty to the beholders.
Okay, so he's literally describing what happens at the new moon. He's literally describing what we go and look at when the sun is on its way down and it shines up its light and it gives its light to the lesser body, which is the new moon, and it begins to illuminate. He's describing for you
That's deep for him with
the new moon. He's describing it, right? And so again, these are the contemporaries of the people in the time of Yeshua and the way in which they viewed the new moon. Okay?
That's what is that? In Genesis, we see he made one light to rule over the lesser light.
Right.
And basically, the scripture that he just said
Yeah,
right here.
right.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. And so, again, when we look at, what is to be said about the people who, were living at that time, when they thought about a new moon, they thought about it in terms of it being the first visible crescent, the first visible light. All right, so Hillel 2. Okay, what we know of as the Jewish calendar. Okay, and so there is a very important article that you're able to find. You can Google this. It's about 58 pages. So and there's a lot of it's very. It's very studious, I would say, this article is. But it goes through history and it's basically double checking to see how the different calendars, what they were basing their calendars on at the time. And it talks about the origin of the Molad. And the Molad is actually the conjunction. The Molad actually is the conjunction. When you understand the history of the Hillel's 2 calendar, the calendar actually is indeed based off of the conjunction. When the calendar was created, it was created in the 300s, at a time when the people who were following the calendar were scattered all over the place. And a way that the people that were keeping the Most High's feast were able to do it uniformly would be to have this system that was created that could be used across the globe, that was created. And this system was based off of the Molad, or the conjunction. And so we're able to see in time that there was a time when Israel was using the first visible crescent, and there's a time when you're able to see as a whole that they stopped doing that and switched over to another way. And this article, again, if you just Google this here, it, like I said, it's a 58-page article, but you're able to see a lot of research on the matter. But what I wanted to look at from that is one of the conclusions that we see over here, and I'll just read it here. The former conviction that the Jewish calendar immediately assumed its definitive shape at the moment of its conception was shaken by two major discoveries. In other words, it was thought that when Hillel made the calendar, it was used across the board whenever he made it, which again was in the 300s, right? So we're talking about, now this is, hundreds of years past the time of Messiah, but it's also hundreds of years past the disbursement of Israel, right? So Israel's already scattered all over the place. And so, again, it was commonly taught that, or understood that when he made the calendar, that's when people started using it automatically. But from this person's research, they find otherwise. The discovery of letters attesting the existence of an important dispute between the Babylonian community led by this particular rabbi and the Palestinian community led by this other rabbi about the Keviyah, or the calendar of these 3 specific years. And these are just going to be the, how they count the quote unquote Jewish years, right? So this.
Also, because they don't have the AD.
Right, they just start. They just start from 0 and go forward, right?
What did they start? They count then. What, the year 4000?
Well,
so they start from Egypt. Moses' Exodus.
I don't know that. I don't know what year 1 is.
Okay.
Right, but it don't correspond with 2022. Like,
yeah.
Right, it overlaps it. Right.
I mean, it seemed like it probably be Egypt time.
Well.
That exile maybe.
I have to double check before I say yes, because I don't really know.
Okay, I got you. Yeah.
But the important thing is that you have 3 discrepancies over here, 3-year discrepancies between these 2 camps. Mm-hmm. And there was letters that was discovered. And then the other point is that the discovery and the publication in 1922 of a document from Cairo, Geniza, a letter from a Babylonian Resh Galuta, showing that the Kaviyah, or the calendar of the year 4596, which is a different year, which if we was thinking about the current era, would be about 835 to 836, right? So this is 1, 2, 3, 4 different years, was different than our present day calendar, and that the Babylonian community received its calendric information from Palestine. And so this discovery was especially important. It proved beyond any doubt that almost 500 years after the inception of the fixed calendar of Hillel, the fixed calendar in its present day form had not yet been instituted. And so that's just to say, if it wasn't instituted at that time, you're still dealing with people who are viewing the first visible crescent in order to determine when the new month is. Because they didn't never look for the dark moon. They never did that. When they got into the calculation of it, that's when they used it in the calculation.
Yeah.
But if they were doing it for their own selves, they did it based on their own viewing of it. And then here they're saying, as a collective, as people who were actually keeping the calendar, it wasn't until it was 800, it said 500 years after its inception was the thing finally in a place where it's universally used. And so all that time you're dealing with people who are actually going and looking for the first visible crescent of the moon. Okay, so final thoughts on all of this is, just dealing with the fact that when we think about what it talks about over there in Deuteronomy chapter 16 and the idea of observing the month of Abib, right? At the end of the day, what we do now, because it goes into, we read, in the chapter, it goes into getting the, having a sacrifice and putting a sacrifice where his name is. We're not doing that.
Right.
We're not doing that.
We're not.
We are doing a memorial
To that.
of these days and times.
Yep.
We want to be as close as possible as we can be. And I think that we're able to achieve that by looking to see what the people at the time of Yeshua were doing. But at the end of the day, we're simply keeping a memorial of these days and times. And so, we can, at the best of our abilities, seek to keep, observe, protect the month of Aviv the best that we can. But you'll never see me, trying to condemn somebody for doing it the way that they do it. I'll tell you why I do it, and I'll tell you why the way that I do it I think is probably right. But I'm not going to sit up here and try to condemn somebody because of how they're doing it. I'll just simply say, show me the evidence.
Yeah.
Show me the proof of the people who did it that way.
Yeah.
And maybe I can agree with you. Because I have mine, and I have more. I didn't even give it to you all. I didn't show you all of the things. Right? There's more. But at the end of the day, we still want to try to do the best that we can to do it, as close to how they did it and the time that they did it. And that's what what I think that we have to focus on when we think about this idea of observing the month of Abib. Because, the point was brought up in terms of, at the end of the day, the most important part that we find in all of this is, in fact, the fact that all of these things, as it says in the book of Colossians, that all of these things point us to Yeshua. All these things are a shadow of what is to come, right? All of these things are a shadow of what we find in, our faith that we have in Yeshua. And so, when we are able to put Yeshua at the forefront of all of these things, it helps us with, I'm not going to sit up here and fall out with people about, these types of things. I'm not going to judge you on your Sabbaths or on drinks or on new moon days, right? I'm not going to judge you on that. Because at the end of the day, all of these things, they point back to Yeshua. All right, so I just wanted to take some time, seeing as how though this chapter brought it up for me, that I would just go ahead and deal with this whole moon situation. So, if we have any questions or comments.
I came all the way over here.
Okay, go ahead.
Oh, you've been writing stuff down, huh? She walk in here like she got notes, like she want to go through.
I do, yeah, a couple of things. So, first, I really like the Kodesh word picture at the beginning. That was good.
I know. I saw that the other day. I started clapping in there. When I was looking at that, I literally started clapping. I gave the Ruach a standing ovation right in that room over here when I seen that.
What you talking about? I might have missed that.
Hold on, let me pull it up.
I never saw that. That's a new addition to the arsenal. It's beautiful.
Let me pull it up on the screen here. that's number 11. Oh, that's right. You can't see it up there. Okay, there it is. The distinction or the differentiation is a door that is tight. Talking about Kodesh. And so, again, we think about the new moon, which Kodesh, or, is the word for new moon. It looks like this door that is tight, that has some light kind of creeping out behind it. And even if we was to close this door all the way, the light, is going to still get out the cracks, right? Just like we see with
The word picture.
with the new moon.
Okay.
And so, I thought that was interesting when I saw that the distinction or the differentiation is a door that is tight.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. All right.
But
What else?
in Psalm 81, because I don't like to make a there's just so many people who are now doing the full moon, and I remember there was people who did the full moon, new moon. I remember a very long time ago, and I just laughed it off at that time. This was like before his kid was born.
Yeah.
And I just was like, oh, what? And then I just didn't think about it again.
Mm-hmm.
And then fast forward it 14 years later,
Yeah.
and half of the Hebrew people I know are doing a full moon. That's
Full
just
moon,
crazy.
new moon. Yeah.
And, but the Psalm 81 verse, where it says to blow up the trumpet in the new moon and the appointed time on our solemn feast day, you brought out that the new moon there is Kodesh.
Mm-hmm. The new moon
The
is
new
Kodesh.
moon is Kodesh.
Mm-hmm.
The appointed time is Kesah,
Mhm.
yeah, which is the full moon, and our solemn
Which
feast
is
day.
always translated as full moon.
Always translated. So,
Or
but,
appointed time.
but the full moon is when all the holy days, the major holy days, the two major holy days are.
Yeah.
So it would just make sense to blow the shofar on the major holy days.
When you think about it, if the new moon is there, why would the new moon be there in another place? I guess unless it's reiterating what it's already said. Because you basically want for it to say, blow your trumpets in the new moon and in the new moon and at your
at your holy day.
and at your holy
Feast
days.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is that the translators know far more than me. And when you look at the literal translations, nobody uses that word for new moon. They always use it for appointed or full moon.
Or full moon, yeah.
They only use it as that. And even when you look to Jacinius, he don't know why it's translated like that, but it don't change the fact that it's translated like that.
He don't have a complete understanding.
No, he don't have
of roots and all that.
No, he doesn't. And
He says it.
kudos to him for even putting that in there, to not act like he got all the answers. He said he don't understand why that is,
But he does.
but it don't change the fact of what it is.
What did it for me, because I was a dark moon person. When you pointed out to me that during the conjunction, it could be days.
3 days.
It could be 3 days.
So you can't start how you gonna count? You'll be thrown off
Where do
unless
start
you
it?
see when to start counting. You gotta see the moon when it start. So that's what did it for me. I mean, because it's. I feel like the Most High. It shouldn't be. It shouldn't be this difficult. It shouldn't be that hard. Like we down here, it's like we intelligent beings, but you shouldn't have to be scientific. It's literally looking at the thing.
Look up at the
So if you don't see it, like how you gonna start counting? So I go out for 2 days. I'm gonna still count anyway. Yeah. I'm gonna start my count with something I can't see.
Don't make sense.
So I'm like, I try to narrow it down to the most simplistic, basic form, because I mean that's how He made nature to be observable. Yeah. If you don't observe nothing happening, how could you? Make an actual determination.
You can't make an observation off of the lack of something.
Yeah.
But you can make it off of the beginning of something, or just the seeing of something. Yeah.
It seems like it's a clock for days. It's a clock for the days. Just as if a clock can go from 12 o'clock to 12 o'clock. It has to go to 12. Just the moon will go from beginning to full back to the beginning like a clock.
I mean, it definitely is a clock. It is a clock.
The month clock.
What we need for the thing to light up in order to be able to see it.
Yeah. Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, so whenever you get the full moon at the Passover time and at the Tabernacles time, that's a sign of the time.
Yeah.
But when you start at the full moon, you get the Tabernacles. There is no moon. It's dark. So you're putting yourself at a position where you don't have
full moon, new moon. Yeah.
Yeah. So that because the moon is supposed to be for the times, the seasons, the days, the appointed times. Mm-hmm. So you would again be at a lack of a sign when it gets to your holy days.
Right.
Right.
You won't have a sign.
Mm-hmm.
If you start at the full, you won't have one.
Yeah.
So it's
and there's another historian, Eusebius, who talks about. First of all, he talks about the fact that he's not the originator of, because Eusebius is later. That's why I didn't even use him. He's like from the 300s, but he's
not even that much later.
Well, I'm saying comparison to Philo and Josephus. And so, but one of the things that he talks about is the fact that he bears witness to the fact that you're seeing these full moons at these specific times that are in line with the equinoxes. Seeing these full moons, the fully lit up moons around these or after these times of the spring and the fall equinox. And so, like you're saying, if you start at the full moon, you don't have that.
You don't have it.
You don't have that there when you get to the Feast of Unleavened Bread or Feast of Tabernacles. And so again, to me, it's totally like it's not something that's verifiable when we think about the full moon, new moon. It's not verifiable. It's just not.
Yeah. Doesn't have a beginning.
I don't know when the beginning is, and even if we say, and then I just want to stop with this, right? Even if we sit up here and say, because there's people who say the crescent moon that's from Babylon.
It did.
Maybe it is from Babylon, but Yeshua didn't care that it was from Babylon, because he said whatever they say to do, you do it. And for me, when I look at the final chapters of the book of Ezra, and we look at how they purified the priests and the people and the ways that the people was doing, having people get rid of they foreign wives and everything else, purifying the priests, purifying the people. I gotta believe that the purification that he did over there was good enough, where they wasn't still dealing with these other customs. that was going to be something that was not pleasing to the Most High. I want to say that Ezra and Nehemiah did a good job over there, whatever they did when they came out of captivity. And I feel like the testament is the fact that that time that went by from then until 70 A.D., you know, the Most High, he allowed for them to exist.
Right.
And doing the things, not only doing the things that they was doing, but then for Yeshua to come along in the time that he did, in the fullness of time, to come along and then co-sign what they was doing.
Right.
And tell us even to do what they did.
Yeah, because he didn't explicitly speak out against it. You would
No.
think it would be a blasphemous thing to be like, you keeping these other people's days.
Yeah.
He would have,
Right.
spoke out.
So
on
that
it.
argument of saying that these things came from Babylon, if they did, if you want to stand on that, I'm saying that Yeshua co-signs it.
And
he's no more than I know.
Right, and we got remember too that these other nations worship the moon in these
Right.
different places.
Right.
They would put the moon symbol on a bull and be like, you know,
Yes.
and they use the crescent in Islam. Don't they got a crescent in their
Yeah.
symbol and stuff like that? And they worship this stuff
Right.
like it's a god. So yeah, I mean,
we can't throw away the lights in the sky because people decide to worship.
yeah, exactly, like the rainbow. What they did with the rainbow. Now we
know.
can't.
It's
we
the
can't.
same idea. Yes.
You know, that they jaded us, making us look at the rainbow funny now. You know what I'm saying? But that's a natural occurrent thing the Most High said, you know? So, yeah.
Yeah.
If you think about what, Satan does is he takes what the Most High does and perverts it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So he'll just twist it a little bit. Put that 1% lie on 99%, and then now it's all perverted. But, that don't mean that, what the natural use for it is bad, because they done twisted it up a little bit.
Yeah.
Because here's the thing. All this stuff was created in the beginning, and what was wicked. After the creation was done, he said it was good.
Right.
It's man that came along and
He
twisted it
definitely
and
said it was
said,
good.
yeah. So now you going to come up with something, that star, I'm going to worship this star and make a star turn upside down. And you worshiping the devil. And because the devil perverts stuff.
Yeah.
The stuff that the Most High said was good and put in order, man twisted and turned it.
I start tripping because, the 6-pointed star and, the 5-pointed star and how they're using it for like Baphomet and these different, the star Remphat. But you look at like just nature, like snowflakes are six.
Six.
6 points.
Oh, that's a deep study.
The
I got to
sun
thank for you on
is a
that.
6-pointed star. Like, I filmed it and I said, wow, that's a 6-pointed star. I mean, it's like
That's how it hit the light. It hit the lens.
Yeah,
but
the
it's
light,
the
and it
lens.
made the 6-pointed star.
It's in life everywhere.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's
look
like,
into
so
it, yeah.
just because they're using it for wickedness, for signs, they put it in movies and all this, and witchcraft, and all of this different things, that doesn't mean that it was originally wicked.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. As far as this, which one in your opinion is more accurate, Julian or Gregorian? Well, I think if we're just comparing the two of those two together, I would say Gregorian over Julian, because I think there was more space that had to get filled in the Julian calendar than there is with the Gregorian.
Gregorian, they at least tried to like at the 31 day, at the
Yeah.
they kind of tried the
Now when we thinking about the calendar that we would be using, neither one would be the answer. But if we were just comparing the two of them compared to each other, I would say Gregorian over Julian. But we kind of work, we understand that our months kind of work inside of, they're kind of separated from the Gregorian calendar. Right? It's not connected. Right? The Gregorian calendar, we're in what month is this?
Fourth.
April. We're in the 4th month.
It just
But in our calendar, like we could be in our first month in the third Gregorian month or in the fourth Gregorian month.
Yeah.
Like it rotates.
Yeah.
And so I think we can use that as kind of just as a kind of a reference point. Like for instance, when we think about the equinox according to the Gregorian calendar, I know that the observable equinox is going to be able to be seen on March the 18th. The observable equinox, the time when the sun will go across the sky from east 90 degrees to 270 degrees. It'll go straight across the sky. And so I can look at the Gregorian calendar and know every March 18th that's going to happen. And so when I think about, where, so what we looked at as far as the history is concerned, what they wanted to happen was to always have Passover in that first constellation after the spring equinox, and to have the Feast of Tabernacles after the fall equinox in that seventh constellation. And so those things don't necessarily correspond with the Gregorian calendar necessarily. So, but we live in a world where we deal with these. We live with two calendars basically, the Hebrew biblical calendar and the Gregorian calendar, which is really not uncommon to our people. We always dealt with different calendar structures. Well, I'm saying not always, but for many years, where we, especially back in the time of Yeshua, where we lived in this place where Rome kind of gave Israel his space to live kind of autonomous, even though it was under Rome. It was my autonomous is a quotation point.
Yeah.
Unto ourselves, right? So, and so, we would have been acknowledging, of course, our own calendar, but we also would have been acknowledging probably at that time the Julian calendar as well. Because you had to deal with
being among them.
Yeah. Just like how we are at this point. So it's just one of those things, I guess. All right, so that being said, we have any last questions, comments over here?
You didn't get into the how you observe the first crescent at night, evening.
Oh, right.
And that,
Yeah. Well, the first crescent, we know. So, well, when we're able to track the moon and we're able to see the moon as it goes through its phases, and we get to the part where it's waning, where it's getting smaller, and it goes into its dark phase. And then now, once it's in its dark phase, you're able to go out and look for the next 3 days to see
the absence.
Well, I'm saying you'll be able to go out and see for when it returns.
Oh, okay. You're looking for it now.
Right. So once it disappears, then you're able to go back and look for it. And so it's going to always be in the western sky. It's going to be in the western sky at sundown. And there's only going to be just really at Erev at the mixture at the going down of the sun, and just maybe a few hours after sunset is the time when you'll see it, because the way the sun and the moon act with one another at the beginning of the month, the sun the sun follows the moon follows the sun. The sun goes and then the moon goes. But then as the in its waxing phase, the sun goes first and the moon follows it. In the waning phase, the moon goes first and the sun follows it until it gets back to the time of it about to become new again, and it's like it gets back in the focus. So when you think about kind of the imagery of the greater light and the lesser light, when it's getting back into function, when it's getting back to the place where you're able to kind of reestablish a new beginning, the moon is back to following the lesser light, is back to following the greater light. And so again, at that time, as the sun gets below the sunset and was still a little bit light, you'll be able to see as the moon is on its way to setting, that first visible crescent. And there's just you can't wait till it's nighttime to see it, because it'll already be set.
You got to see the transition.
You got to see it at that sunset time.
Yeah.
Because it's so closely following the sun. If you wait too long, you're not going to see it.
Right.
And so that first visible crescent is in the western sky, right at or after sunset. Yeah. All right, so that being said, for now, we will be done. I just want to say that on next Shabbat, we'll probably have a pre-recorded broadcast, seeing as how though the Seder is going to be on Saturday night. So I'll still broadcast, but it'll be a pre-recorded broadcast. So if you want to leave comments in the comment section, you won't get a quick response because it won't be live. But I just wanted to say that we're doing it that way. All right, so that being said, we want to thank everybody for coming out. Thanks everybody for your comments. It always makes the Midrash better to have the participation. I want to remind everybody to make sure that you're subscribed. Hit the like button. Put some comments in the YouTube comment section. Share it with your buddies. And y'all willing, we will be back on next Shabbat to do it again. All right? All right, then Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.